HR now for around 80 years. So I started working in the transport industry and across the public sector. Then moved into the manufacturing space where I looked after learning and development for a range of sites across the UK. Then moved into more professional services as a HR advisor for a large engineering firm. And now I work with clients across the private, public and third sectors on a range of HR issues. Although I do a lot of work in operational HR, my current focus is a lot about strategic HR, analytics, project management. And you see some of the skills on the screen there. So in terms of what we're going to be looking to cover out today, I want us to have a rethink about what is well-being. It's a word that's used so often at the moment, and we just want to make sure that everyone's on the same page about our approach to that. We'll be talking a bit about some of the key upcoming well-being challenges we think you'll face across the organisation over the next few years. And then we'll look a little bit about what we feel would be a good way to help manage your employees' well-being in response to those challenges. At the end, we'll then be running through some key red flags, so things that you really need to be aware of and keep an eye out for moving forward, just in case there's anything that needs immediate attention. So, normally in these sessions, I would ask you to keep your phones away, but for the purpose of today, we do have an interactive element. So just make sure that you have a smartphone to hand for today. So we'll start off with what is well-being. Well-being is a word that's used a lot these days, especially in the context of businesses and employees. We're all told to take care of our well-being and to think about much more than just physical health. But what does that actually mean? Given the last few years, this is at the forefront now more than ever. However, before beginning a new overall approach to well-being, it is vital to understand what is it that we actually mean by this. The CIPD have done a lot of research lately about this, especially in the context of the emerging societal changes following the coronavirus pandemic. Between their growing the health and well-being agenda and their health and well-being at work surveys, they determined that there are 7 key domains of well-being. So we start with health, and this does start with physical health. This is about, are you promoting health within your organization? That ranges from occupational health support right down to managing disability of employees. We include in this about physical safety, are your environment safe? And also we do include mental health as part of this. You have to consider this both in terms of the individual, so stress management, managing in health, to training and upskilling leaders and managers to keep mental health in mind. For this, we think about things like conflict resolution and difficult conversation training. Next, we've got work itself. How is the working environment? Is it ergonomically designed and open? What are the demands of the work? How does the job role, working hours, workload, work-life balance all impact on well-being? How much autonomy do your employees have? Are people rewarded fairly for their work? Reward is something I talked about in one of these previous workshops. Values and principles are also key in terms of your approach to well-being. Is your business led by values? Do you have a clear mission as an organization? Is your work ethical and the way that you conduct that work ethical? What role does inclusion and diversity play in your workplace? Well-being as a collective of employees is also key. Do your employees have a clear voice in the organization? Is communication with leadership two-way dialogue? Considering this as fostering positive relationships between employees and management, as well as between the employees themselves. Growth is also a vital part of well-being. Nobody likes stagnation. In an organizational context, here we're probably thinking about career development. Are we providing the right kind of mentoring, coaching, and performance management for our teams? Additionally, are we helping employees to grow emotionally through their relationships in the workplace? Underpin a commitment to lifelong learning in your approach to well-being, and you do foster an environment that's more open and collaborative in terms of its culture, and that's always going to have a positive impact on the well-being of your teams. We've also got lifestyle in here. This is intrinsically linked to health, obviously, but this is more about a culture of behavior and choices that impact everything else. Does your organization encourage staff to undertake physical activity and healthy lifestyle choices? We see a range of different initiatives in this space, ranging from lunchtime walk clubs or walk meetings, all the way down to the more specifics like subsidizing healthy options on a canteen menu. Finally, we've also got financial well-being. Like it or not, this is linked to pretty much every other domain here. It's either an enabler of positive choices or is a source of stress and negativity. This is more than just salary and benefits, but instead consider other ways of managing financial impact for your teams. So for example, do you have clear pathways for retirement planning and management of retirement? Do you signpost members of your team to debt counseling and other financial advice options? These things are always available and form a key part of your approach to well-being. So I mentioned that I wanted you to have a smartphone to hand. And next up, we're going to be having a chat about some of the big challenges we think we're going to face across organizations over the next 2 years. You can either use the camera on your smartphone to scan the QR code, which will take you to a link where you'll be able to submit answers. Or if you go to menti.com on your smartphone and use the code you'll see here, it'll take you to our question slide where we're going to come up with a word cloud and some of the key things that you're saying. So we're going to be looking at what are some of the key well-being challenges organizations are going to face over the next 2 years. I'll leave this slide up shortly, and once we start getting some responses in, I'll move it over to the word cloud so we can have a discussion about that. It's great to see a range of some of these answers here. So we've got burnout, COVID, delayed anxiety. That's quite an important one. We'll be talking about that in a little bit more detail later on. Recognizing as well about mental health issues, cost of living. That's also another key one. We're seeing a lot about that in the news at the moment. It's not just the direct impact that that can have, obviously, financially on people, but also the mental stress of that. Even if it's something you're not experiencing right now, you can guarantee at some point, at least once a week, you're going to see either on the news or social media, people talking about, for example, the energy prices that are on the rise at the moment. There's just this constant bombardment in society of, oh, everything's about to get terrible. And that's really difficult for people to deal with across the board. So I'm just going to leave it up to see if anyone else has got some additions to make. These are starting to come in nicely now. So yeah, we've got politics. I guess that kind of feeds into what I was saying as well, that there's a constant bombardment for people when they're tuned into social media or the news about what's going on there. Balancing work life, we're talking about that a bit later on as well. Job security, this all feeds into the same kind of stuff where there's so many different challenges. And that's what I really want us to take away from this, that whilst we can see from the word cloud that some of the more common ones people are mentioning, it is remote working, it is COVID, and these things that are still lingering. But there's such a variation of challenges that we're expecting to face moving forward. It's quite an uncertain world. It's probably for a long time not felt quite as impactful as it has now, especially given how connected everyone is and the nature of communications, that there's just so much going on. And it is difficult. The human brain isn't wired to deal with stuff like this. And one of the things that we're going to be looking at today is about, as an organization, what to watch out for, what you can do right. So thanks for submitting those. That was really good. I'm just going to move us back to our slideshow now. Before I kick off with that, did anyone have anything they wanted to add, whether you want to say something in the chat box or just take yourself off mute, anything you want to talk about before we move on? So I'll take that as everyone's happy to move on. So one of the next things we're going to be talking about is those trends in well-being. We've talked about some of the key challenges and what's that going to look like in the well-being space. We're finally starting to see a move away from our relationships with working time and productivity. People are more aware than ever about their relationship between work and home life, especially with the rise in people who are continuing to work from home instead of returning to offices full time. Additionally, while we are taking steps to reduce stress across organizations, we can't ignore the impact of the last 2 years and the fact that stress levels are extremely high for many people across the world. For this, I'm suggesting a focus on immediate well-being initiatives that are looking with a focus on reducing existing stress. Use this to get some consideration time for longer-term strategies related to preventing future stress, but we have an immediate crisis to deal with before we focus on prevention in the future. We've talked a little bit as well about financial wellness. So for many people, financial issues are a key impactor on all things well-being. Between those skyrocketing living costs and long-standing impact from COVID, this isn't going away anytime soon. In considering a new approach to managing well-being as an organization, you should consider how financial well-being fits into this. We've already discussed managed retirement plans and debt counseling, but speak to your employees to understand their issue and build education and knowledge surrounding financial issues into a wider approach to benefit around that well-being awareness. The pandemic led many resources moving to remote delivery. That probably explains why you're listening to me through a pair of headphones right now instead of us having a conversation about these issues in a room somewhere. Alongside this, there's a growth in the digital delivery of health and well-being provisions. Digital health is, in my opinion, the future of healthcare. You should explore this, explore the market and what's currently available in any approaches you have to managing physical health in the organization. This might range to moving to virtual occupational health, right down to I know some organizations now put you in touch with services where you can speak to a GP via video call on the phone. I know lots of healthcare services are moving in that direction as well. But this is also an opportunity to put yourself at the forefront of this kind of activity. Family well-being is a key trend as well. With family and work life more intertwined than ever, it's important for employees to understand the impact of well-being on families ultimately impacts the employers themselves and the organization as a whole. Forward-thinking organizations are making a greater effort to include immediate and/or extended family support in the approach to well-being. Consider what you can do for the family of your employees and how that might have a direct impact on the people within your business. But the ultimate trend underpinning all of this is the continued growth of awareness surrounding well-being. After all, that's why you're here today. Business leaders can no longer face away from the importance of well-being in performance as an organization. And this has naturally resulted in increased discussion around well-being in commercial spaces. This growth is not stopping. Well-being is a mainstream conversation. If you're not doing anything on well-being, do something now. If you are doing something on well-being, think about what you could be doing better. The workforce is continuing to become more aware of well-being, and this is going to be a critical part of the story of your organization and how it's perceived internally and externally. Anyone got any questions about those trends before I move on? Okay, so next we're going to be talking about how you need to be approaching this as an organization, and we call this a holistic approach. We recommend that you do take a more holistic approach in your management. The 7 domains that we've talked about are not treated as individual hurdles to be overcome. Every one of these is linked to the others. They're a series of, if you like, well-being nodes on a complex map that covers your most complex resource of all, your people. The focus on conversation at the moment is, and rightfully so, often around mental health. We've made huge strides as a society in our conversations around mental health, and we're not there yet, but we're moving towards a space where we consider its impact with the same level of importance and vigor as mental health and as physical health. The CIPD's 2021 Health and Wellbeing at Work report talked about how many organizations in their growing shift on wellbeing are putting mental health at the forefront of their strategies through employee assistance programs, stress management training, and more. In contrast, physical injury at the workplace has continued to fall significantly over the past 50 years. However, this isn't to say that we should ignore this as part of a holistic, all-round well-being approach. I'm not talking here about your basic legal compliance with the Health and Safety at Work Act that's something that you should be focusing on anyway. Here, we're considering our approach to physical health in line with mental health and its importance through initiatives surrounding lifestyle choices, activity, and general health of people. A key way that you might be able to do this in your organization is aligning a health and safety and a well-being strategy. If you don't have a well-being strategy, make sure to spend some time this week setting up a working group in your business to help determine how you should be approaching the well-being challenges coming up specific to your organization. If you do have a well-being strategy, consider your next steps in helping your business to take a more holistic approach to well-being around those 7 domains. Having a separate health and safety policy and a well-being strategy straight away suggests that these are 2 separate issues to approach from different angles. Bring these domains together and you'll help protect the well-being of your employees on a new forward-thinking level. So we're going to be talking now about some of the key things that you need to watch out for. And I'm going to be talking about this on an individual basis and wider across your organization. When it comes to looking at individuals, the majority of red flags that suggest that there's a well-being crisis fall into one of these 3 categories. The first is physical function. So are they showing signs of stress, constantly tired perhaps? Have you noticed rapid weight gain or loss? If they're normally conscious of appearance, have they shown that they're now less aware of this? Are they physically agitated, nervous, or generally showing noticeable changes in behavior? We then got emotional function. Have they started becoming more irritable, having a shorter fuse perhaps? Are they noticeably frustrated more often? Perhaps they're becoming more teary and upset. Are they becoming difficult to engage with? Our last one is then cognitive function. Are they interpreting things in a different way? Are they often taking offense to what's being said or focusing on the negatives in conversations and events? Are they responding in a significantly different way to events? If they're usually logical, calm and collected, are they starting to approach things in a more convoluted and chaotic manner? Obviously, every individual has their own baseline, and it's up to you to know your people, know your teams, and be able to spot these potential changes in behavior with a key focus on these 3 factors. Should you reach a point where you're beginning to suspect that somebody is having a bit of a well-being crisis and you need to get more involved, then there's some key steps you can take. This plan is called the ALGEE plan, A-L-G-E-E, and it can help you manage these difficult conversations. The first A is for assess. You need to assess the situation for potential risk of harm, either to yourself or to others. This may sound over the top, but you'll be entering this conversation with just a fraction of the information that you should probably need. You don't know what situation that individual's in. Once you have assessed that it's safe to have the conversation, it's then about listening. This person isn't necessarily going to want to sit there and listen to you telling them why their concerns are invalid, or how you've been through worse, how they just need to pull it together. Listening is about creating an environment where, if they want, they can have an open discussion about their experience. Make sure you're continually giving reassurance. In the most basic way, make it clear that you're listening. Talk about how there are pathways and avenues to resolve their well-being crisis, and, where you can, provide them the right kind of information. For encouragement, we always advise that you encourage individuals to seek professional help. Whether the crisis is related to mental health or financial issues, there are professionals out there who can help. They have specific, extensive training in handling crises like these. Of course, you can help, but know your limits. You always need to encourage pursuit of professional help. I will, of course, say that you can't force anyone to seek it, but make it clear that you strongly feel that is the best course of action moving forward. In terms of rounding off the conversation, You should make sure you've done what you can to identify the steps that someone can take to immediately help their situation. Here we talk about enabling self-help. So you might want to run through support strategies with them, making clear they know exactly what it is that they need to do in order to take the first steps to bring them out of this crisis. If you'd like to learn more about algae or dealing with crisis issues, I do strongly recommend you speak to your organisation about mental health first aid. You might want to volunteer to do a course. So before I go on to talking about this on a more organisational level, just wondering if anyone had any questions, any comments, anything they'd like to share before we move on.
Yeah, hello, it's Charlotte from BipSync. It's kind of part question, part comment, and I'm happy to be sort of disagreed with. Do you sort of personally think that putting so much pressure or stress on the need for physical and mental health puts people under more pressure, causing more anxiety? And I'm just talking about some of the tools that we're using here to kind of like identify well-being. None of us are doctors, and asking people to look out for weight changes and stuff to me seems quite invasive, and I feel like a lot of my colleagues would find that invasive as well. And for a lot of people over the last 2 years, it's all just been about getting through the day. And there's one thing having like creating an open and approachable environment with tools available if people need them, and enabling them to come to you if they need something. But to me, it's another thing, kind of forcing the issue of, right, you have to be more healthy, eat better, eat when we tell you to eat. Well, everyone's just got individual circumstances. I'm sorry if that came across as negative. I'm happy to be disagreed with. I just feel like this is the comment about weight was a bit triggering for myself, and I understand that that's how it would feel to other people. But it may be a good tool if used appropriately.
Yeah, I absolutely understand that. And I think, for example, this kind of stuff in itself, it can be triggering. As you say, that there's a lot of pressure from a lot of angles, and these kind of conversations around well-being, mental health, and all these things, it adds that next level of pressure on. And I've personally been in situations where I think, okay, do you know what? I actually need to focus on myself right now, and perhaps there might be issues that I'm becoming aware of amongst my colleagues. But as you say, it's been such a difficult 2 years that actually I think it's important to step back and take awareness of your own situation. When we're going through stuff like this, it's always about advice and guidance. As you say, there are individual contexts for everything. Everyone's got their own situation, their own challenges to face. And it's not about saying these are the exact things that you need to do, and this is the perfect way to do it. What I was hoping to get from these conversations is kind of a framework to build upon, because everyone's situation is unique. Their friends, their colleagues, all in their own way. It's about understanding roughly what it is that we could do if we find ourselves in a position where we're happy to step in and help.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that.
Cool. Anyone else with any further comments before we move on? Okay, so we're now going to look at it from a more organizational perspective. So identifying early signs of well-being issues and reduced employee engagement through well-being can help to stem off some of these problems before they get worse throughout your organization. When we're talking about wider teams, it is more difficult to identify some of those red flags on a wider corporate level, as these can depend greatly on your organizational culture, industry, and other unique elements of your business. However, there are some key things that you can keep an eye on. Employee turnover is always a key marker of whether or not there's some intrinsic issue in your organization. UK-wide average turnover is around 15%, but this does vary industry to industry. If you notice that your employee turnover is above average, or there's a steady increase in employee turnover, you may want to consider investigation, as the majority of employee departures are at some point tied back to one of those 7 well-being domains that we talked about. General reductions in engagement amongst your employees can also be a marker that there's development potential in your approach to well-being. One of the more common signs of this is generally a reduced acceptance of critical feedback in the organization. And this feeds into the second one I've got there about changes in problem solving. So every organization thrives on its top problem solvers. When key decision makers start shifting activity towards short-term results, it's papering over the cracks, if you like, this can often suggest that employees are reducing their investment in your organization, might be shaping themselves up towards exit. Obviously, with each industry and each organization having its own unique culture, it's hard to put a standpoint on this is exactly what you need to watch out for. But again, this is a range of things that could perhaps suggest that something's not quite going right in your approach to well-being. Almost all of these problems somewhere are going to feed back into those 7 domains. So as a business, what are the key things you can look to do next? There are some steps that you can take to remedy this and make a quick start on it. A key one is about beginning an open and frank dialogue amongst employees about their thoughts in the organization. Design a pulse survey, or whatever else you see fit to call it, to ask the pertinent questions that you think need answering across the business. Anonymous responses can often provide an environment where employees feel more comfortable to be honest and frank in their feedback. Of course, there's also the opportunity to lean too far the other way, so be mindful of some of the feedback you might receive if you choose to pursue an anonymous approach. Nevertheless, a pulse survey, climate survey, or whatever you'd like to call it, is a really useful way of getting to the heart of how your employees are actually feeling about the organization's direction and the impact that that's having on their well-being. With job satisfaction and growth being a huge part of well-being for some, ensuring that your performance management process is robust is another excellent way of managing the exposure of stress to employees and providing the right environment of growth. Switch the focus away from annual reviews to a more organic process of cyclical feedback. Put positive response at the center of your approach to performance management, and build development plans surrounding those improvement areas to really help people through that growth domain. On a more macro level, if you continue to struggle in developing communication with your wider employee base, working groups may provide an option. Allow employees from each department to put themselves forward as representatives of the team, no matter what their level is in the organization, and build a working group with regular meetings to discuss key issues in the business and work collaboratively across teams to develop solutions. The key takeaway from this is something that I've been talking about a lot so far this afternoon. It's about looking at your own unique system, your own way of operating as a business, and your own way of operating as a person. Everyone's going to have a different approach, whether that's as an individual or as a wider team, into how they feel about well-being issues and the best ways to approach that as a wider team. So some of the things that we've talked about today, it's about a framework to understand perhaps what it is that you need to do. It would be great to have specific next steps that you can take. And from these, you'll be able to develop those which are unique and specific to your organization. It's about relevancy. The last thing that you want to be doing is putting in individual initiatives that just sort of seem to be ticking boxes, because that is quite often the perception of these well-being approaches. It's about taking a wider, more rounded strategy, looking over those 7 domains, understanding your impact as a business and as a person on those 7 domains for your people and for your wider teams, and understanding what it is that you can do specifically to improve on that moving forward. So that covers everything that I was looking to run through today. Now's an opportunity. If you've got any further questions or comments, something you'd like to share with the wider group, or if you just want to have a discussion about any of the things we've talked about today, either pop anything you'd like into the chat box or take yourself off mute and we can have a chat. So in terms of examples of pulse survey questions, again, this is something that is quite sort of specific to your operations as a business. But key things that you need to be looking at are, how do people feel about career development in the organization? How people are feeling about working environment. So you can say sort of, how do you feel about the facilities that are in place? Some organizations tend to choose a sort of basic 1 to 5 scale. It becomes quite easy to then analyze the information if you're just given specific numbers. That can also be quite restrictive in an approach. So some will choose to take a sort of more open-ended text box approach. So people will be able to write in whatever comments they see fit. Takes a little bit more time to analyze and go through. That is something that I do personally recommend, though. I think as well, it depends on perhaps what you see as some of the key challenges in your business. So as a rough example, if you are in an industry that's been potentially more affected than others over the last 2 years, and yet there's a concern for job security through the organization, those are some of the questions you can ask to understand the specifics of the impact on your people. So you can say sort of, where do you see yourself moving forward, or do you still see yourself moving forward in this organization in 12 months' time? That can be quite a pertinent question, and one that I would only recommend you insert if you are taking the anonymized approach. But that can help you to understand really whether the people that you're working with see a longer term future for themselves in the business. So there's lots of examples and stuff for this available online. I would gather as much info as you can, and then perhaps consider what's specifically relevant to you as an organization. What are the key challenges that you want to face? It's good to have something that is quite wide-based, but I also wouldn't want to be asking too many questions, especially if you've got large amounts of employee in a high turnover, high productive business. They're not going to want to sit there and spend half an hour running through a survey. It's got to be something that's quick, key to the point, and specific for the actions that you want to take moving forward.
Any other questions? Anyone want to come off the mic or pop a question in there for Alex now that you've got him here? Or if anything that comes up that you think about later, they're still okay to contact you, Alex?
Yeah, not a problem. My email address is on the screen now. So if you do think of anything, or you want to have a chat about this in a little bit more detail without everyone here, then feel free to just drop me a message and we can either arrange time to catch up, or I can answer any questions you've got by email.
Fab. Another brilliant session with you. Lots of information to go away with there. Are your slides available if anybody wants them as well?
Yeah, that's fine. I can send slides across to you to pass on to everyone here today.
Great. If anyone wants them, let me know. I will hold them to ransom though for completed AG3s to come back to me. So if you do want them, just drop me an email and I'll get those out to you once you've signed your AG3s there. Anyone that was joined us a little bit later on, if you let me know, I can send you the link once the recording. It'll go off for editing now. Once it's available, I can let you have that as well there. So I think that's everything there. So thanks, Alex. Thanks everyone for joining us, giving us up your time. I'm not sure when the next session or webinar is, but I know you're all getting emails from our team with all the things that are available there, so keep an eye out. And again, on your feedback forms, if there's anything you think that you'd like covered as maybe not being covered in the webinars, just pop those on there as well for us, and we can have a look at those for the future ones there. So thanks, Alex, and thanks everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Thanks all.
Thanks, bye.